Ahojte milí maturanti, vítam vás na hodine, ktorú som dopredu nahral, pretože v tejto chvíli ja skúšam na krajskom kole sočky. No a aby ste neprišli o jednu z tých posledných 6 hodín, ktoré máme, tak som vám nahral túto hodinu dopredu a prebehnem ďalej poznámky, ktoré máme. No ako už viete, tento týždeň, od začiatku tohto týždňa, tak maturity vám teda zrušili a známku vám vyrátame z dejepisu a z tohto dejepisného semináru, ten sa vám bude tiež rátať. Takže vám len pripomínam, že známku, ktorú máte k dispozícii jednu, tak je v podstate z eseje, ktorú ešte odovzdáte, a samozrejme známky, ktoré ste dostali doteraz. Takže 18. apríla prosím vás do 8. do nedele do 8. večer mi posielate na môj e-mail vaše práce. No a uvidíme. Teraz som zistil, že tu mám ešte telku zapnutú, pardon. No, vypni sa, dobre, ďakujem. No a v podstate pôjdeme ďalej. Nás čaká niekoľko tém z novoveku, no a ja sa pokúsim prejsť čo najviac. Neviem to odhadnúť, že ako to vyjde na tú 1 hodinu, ale uvidíme ďalej. No každopádne môj plán je prísť po 19. storočie, teda po vypuknutie prvej svetovej vojny, pretože samozrejme to 20. sme už opakovali. Nepôjdem už podľa maturitných zadaní, takže skôr pôjdem takým smerom, že čo vám asi bude treba na príjmačky a hlavne na štúdium na vysokých školách. Čiže tak, ako som sa vás v stredu pýtal, ja ešte tá hodina inak, ja ju mám o chvíľu až, hodinku, ale ja sa vás tam spýtam a som sa vás spýtal, že aké témy vy potrebujete, chcete zopakovať, prebrať aj kvôli testom. Takže môžete mi aj po prípade napísať, že to by som sa radi venovali, potrebujem to na školu a tak ďalej. Dobre? Okay, so today's topic, because of the previous lesson we ended up Middle Ages, medieval times, so we are moving to early modern period. Actually, modern period is divided in 3 parts that seems to be divided in 3 parts. Like one is early modern period, hovorím ako raný novovek. The other is high modern period, but actually only few people calls it like this, which is generally called like period of revolutions, period of enlightenment or scientific revolution, period of emancipation. And this is from revolutions, like 19th century. Actually, I have these revolutions as a part of early modern period, but I go fluently to the 19th century, which can be like for the results of the revolutions it is visible. Then late modern period can be called like this 20th century or current history, but it's already 121 years, so it's a bit different. Okay, so what I want to show you early modern period overview is the assignment that I have given to third graders and third graders. So this is something what we have in here: Ottoman conquest, Humanism, Renaissance, Age of Discoveries, Reformation, and religious conflicts. Then the other would be about revolutions. So I just show you what actually I believe that you should know about the Ottoman conquest. That you will see also the notes. Would be some famous Ottoman sultans, their contributions to the empire and to the sultanate, of course, and so on. Definitely the map of Vialets, Sanjaks, and Pashaliks, for us it is really important. And of course conflicts and military that Ottomans had excellent at that time. Concerning Humanism, Renaissance, of course, definitely you need to know about White Image in Italy, definitions for both of them, and distinction, because Renaissance is artistic style, since Humanism is kind of philosophy, maybe ideology. That can be, of course, mixture of it, but it's different. Then about some features that are in here, you'll see in the presentation that I just made revision, brief one, and of course many people that are in here: Renaissance artists and humanistic scholars. Okay, what else? Of course, some famous sites from Europe and Slovakia, just like for Gothic and Romanesque architecture. Depends. I know that some of you are going to study art, history of art, or design, and so on. So these things will be really important for you to know. Of course, for all of you, Age of Discoveries, just like we need to understand medieval Italy to talk about Renaissance and Humanism, we need to know about unification, actual deliberation of Spain from Muslim hands, from the more Caliphate of Cordoba and Abbasid dynasty. So that is the part that you need to know. Of course, before Portuguese and Spaniards, you had some other states, nations that had been sailing. We are going to deal with this too. Okay, purposes, reasons for the discoveries, timelines, and so on. Maybe some division of that was kind of for general knowledge for students to gain, and also navigators from various countries. It was not only the Spanish and Portuguese, these Iberian navigators, but French, English, a couple of them, the Dutch, Russians, and Italians too, because they were sailing for the other countries. Be sure about the map and be sure that you know all of these. And about Reformation, there are many things from the reasons for Reformation in Germany and about some basic like main influencers like Martin Luther, John Calvin, or Ulrich Zwingli, for example. Of course, Jan Hus, John Wycliffe are among them too, from the periods before. Okay, Augsburg Calvinists and so on. So this is actually what I would recommend you to do or to analyze is to have it this table like this. So what was compared the Reformation process in these countries in this table for Germany, France, Netherlands, and even Habsburg Hungary, I call it like our Hungary. So who initiated it, who approved it, who opposed it, who finally set it up, and denominations today. So what is the confession religions in those countries in these days? So this is interesting. Of course, Counter-Reformation is called that we call recatholization, but it's really uncommon to use it in English because they call it Counter-Reformation since English speakers didn't match or didn't meet with this in their histories like real strong recatholization as we know it, including Jesuit and Inquisition and so on. So this is interesting. Family tree of monotheistic religions, this is another story. And of course 30 Years War that you remember from Slovak lessons that I wanted you to understand all the belligerents, name of commanders, even years, of course, pretense results. I should add it, also one column in here. Also be sure about the map, because today when you travel from one country to another to understand why there are Muslims in Albania, Bosnia, why there are Dutch Calvinist church in Netherlands, for example, but Bavarians in Germany are Catholics even today. So it is really important to understand what is the confession in various countries, but I will show you. Okay, the other part, and I will open it for you. No, I will not. Okay, I will. I just decided to do that. So our revolutions, and for the revolutions, sorry. Pardon me. For the revolutions, there are only 3 countries in here: England and United Kingdom, or this British Empire, USA, and France. And for that reason, for example, like this, this chart is depicting basic events since like the settling of US. Actually, for each country, there were like dramatic things happening, which led to revolutions and big changes in the government, which is actually the result of each revolution, each successful revolution. Okay, plenty of videos and comparative chart. You remember that, so please just open it and revise it so you just remember it. And if you didn't do it properly the previous year, so maybe you know that some of these were kind of like revision for you, and it was instead of the test, so that was a different thing. Blind map. Okay, I remember how I was reading all of the stuff. So as much work you had, the work you had, as much work, so much work I had also while assessing it. Okay, guys, so you know it, you remember it. So let's move on. And let's go back to early modern period. So what I want to show you gradually and recommend you to study and know for for your university studies, since now when you don't have tests with the Ottomans, of course, we spoke about Byzantine Empire and its fall, and that would be actually the beginning of the other empire in here. Ottoman and Ottoman Turks was another branch of, just like Seljuk Turks in Anatolia. They established their sultanate later on and gradually became a great power that conquered Byzantine Empire, Balkan states, Middle East, and even North Africa by the 20th century. About the military, with Janissary armies that were kind of like enslaved boys trained up, raised up in military camps, and professional loyal soldiers for all of them. The other very important were firearms, not only cannons, heavy cannons, but even muskets, so fire guns that even these Janissaries are holding. And mass use of it allowed Ottoman Turks to destroy their enemies in the Balkans and Byzantine Empire, and later on even in the Middle East, because if you look at the map in here, you will see that from Bursa, that was very close actually to Constantinople, they managed to conquer the lands, not only Anatolia, nowadays Turkey, but especially in the Balkans. And at the times when they were attacking Hungary, fighting in Hungary, still they were only like in 2/3 of Turkey, current Turkey. And in the times when they were fighting in like our lands, that was just time before, in like 1520 something, by Selim the First, when he conquered the former Arabic Abbasid Caliphate and tried to invade like Mesopotamia and Persia, but they were not so successful. Okay, and this part is actually the wars against Balkan nations from like Serbia, of course, Byzantine Empire, but Serbia, Bulgaria, the Battle of Kosovo, Poland, Battle of Nikopol with Sigismund Luxembourg, how Wallachia and Moldavia became vassals of Ottoman Empire, how Bosnia and Albania were resisting their populations, so Turks had to Islamize them, and force them somehow to become like loyal to Turks. Okay, a couple of these guys like Mehmed II and famous battles of Varna, for example, Second Battle of Kosovo, and actual fall of Constantinople that we also had like plenty of stories and pictures that we know how they conquered it. That was still amazing that a fortification that was older than 1000 years still stood, and they need to use these heavy cannons. This actually was made by Hungarian who actually wanted to use it for the defense of Constantinople, but because the Byzantines couldn't pay him enough money, so he offered it to the Turks. So use it to break down, to destroy the gates of this fortification, but still they attack much weaker gates and fortification from Condor. It's the Golden Horn Bay, and to get there using these ships, they had to carry them and pull them on like Vikings, in the past, but over the mountains, over the hills, across these lands and attack also this fortification. So this is the thing how Constantinople was the conquered and Istanbul became the capital part. So even the Hagia Sophia, the temple of the divine wisdom, was turned into mosque. That's in 20th century it was just a museum, and last year's Turks are planning to restore it back to mosque again. Okay, Suleiman the Magnificent, for us it was a terrible conqueror because he was the one who conquered Hungary. I'm not going to speak a lot about this because we have plenty of things to do. Again, maps in here with bigger things. What started with decline was definitely naval battle of Lepanto, in which united forces or navies of Spain, of Papal State, of Kingdom of Sicily, of Maltese knights, and definitely I had forgot something. So Knights of Rhodos defeated Turks and actually prevented them from expansion in West Mediterranean. So Lepanto is in here, and in case they would win, they would overrule the seas. So that would be chance for them to attack islands of Corsica, Sardinia, and maybe invade Italy and France and Spain gradually. Yeah, but they didn't conquer Banska Štiavnica, and they didn't have enough gold and silver and other metals from Slovakia to do that, to finance their expedition. Just like in the Battle of Vienna, when they were defeated in 1683 by united forces of Holy Roman Empire, Austria, Papal State, Italian states, and especially Polish-Lithuanian armies in here. In Then in 18th century, there were two countries that pushed Turks, Ottoman Empire, from their borders. First, it was a Russian expansion to the Black Sea, especially during the reign of Peter the Great, Tsar of Russia. Uh, he had two wars: the Great Northern War against Sweden, that was in the north, but before that, he expanded here in the south to the Sea of Azov because Russia didn't have access to the sea. And first thing was to defeat the Khanate of Crimea, who were vassals of Ottoman Empire. And in like 17 by 1710, so Russians defeated the Turks in here and overruled Crimea and the southern parts of Ukraine. Gradually, they stopped pushing them down, and especially 19th century, Russians supported uprisings and the liberation struggle of Romanians, so Moldovans, Wallachians, Bulgarians, Serbians, Greeks, of course, and there were many conflicts that I will mention in the 19th century history that will be actually pretty important. And you see, we didn't have enough time to use it, so that was one thing. And the other was Austrian Empire, that after this Battle of Vienna, they very quickly deliberated Slovakia, also Buda and Pest, and started to push Turks back to the Danube in the south and to Belgrade. In Karlovat's peace, that was 1699, that was first phase, and second phase was 1717, the final peace with Austria. That actually ended up this Austrian expansion that was restored again in the 19th century, at the beginning of 20th century, with annexation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and invasion to Serbia, even, because that was the thing that for Austrians, for Austria-Hungary later on, it was good to have ally in the south occupying another Slavic states. More independent Slavic states means more influence of Russia, and more influence of Russians means more resistance even to among the Slavic nations within the empire, just like Czechs, Croats, Slovaks, Rusenes, Poles, and so on. So that was interesting thing to see that during like 1 or 2 centuries, Ottoman Empire was actually kind of like a good guy for everybody. Despite Russians want to fight it, of course they didn't. They were not just like today. They are not like good guys and we help you with Sputnik and so on. No, always they have some intentions. For them, it was to maybe conquer Istanbul and restore Byzantine Empire. That was hard for them. It was highly possible. Czechoslovakia was created for the first time after 1,000 years. So for them, it was no problem to banish all the Turks from those territories, like millions of them, and maybe say gain access to the Mediterranean Sea. But Russia, from the point of view of huge map and from the point of view of British Empire, definitely they would challenge even British to in the fight for Egypt, for Persia, for Afghanistan, access to the Indian Ocean, and creating huge empire in here. So maybe I had like a big I'm dreaming about the topic that was really global, but that is also the part of it. Okay, let's move to another topic we have in here, Renaissance and Humanism. You remember this presentation, so I just go through it very quickly, what is there inside. So you have to start always with Italy, that was divided in this southern kingdom of two Sicilies or kingdom of Naples, then the papal state in central Italy, and many independent city-states, duchies, republics, city republics, naval empires from one town like Venice or Genoa, that all of them inherited Roman heritage. They had republican form of government, and they have very strong, very powerful merchant social class, which is very important because it is outside of the feudal system, and it can change at their own destiny. They can earn money. They know things. They read and know things, and they can challenge the authority of the church, of their dogmas, and completely change the system that is in here. At the beginning of all the changes within the revolutions, there was humanism and Renaissance. And what is interesting for us, that Renaissance was actually restoration of antiquity, of antique ideas about individual freedoms, about participation of people upon ruling in the state, within the state. That state should serve to the people, and the people are capable of improving. That we don't believe, or even I had just like argument in over the Facebook, which was actually basic thing. If you believe that people can change or not, if they can get better, if they learn, if they are capable of learning new things, accepting new things, and changing themselves to be like virtue, man and women, of course. Okay, Renaissance and humanism. You have these definitions in here. Renaissance, rebirth of antiquity, classical ideals, of course, within the art, because art is expression of your thinking, of your philosophy, of your political, cultural ideas you have in here. So this is a so important thing that it is this bridge between Middle Ages and early modern period. Literature, philosophy, art, politics, science, religion, many other aspects in here. The other very important thing is it was based upon reality, real depiction. If you want to have something real, precise, you need to know, not only you have to be like a talented person to draw nicely, and have some feeling about colors. It means to understand how colors are being created within the physics, within optics, how colors are made from, like from chemistry. It means to understand, if you want to draw a person, you need to make a sketch. You need to make a sketch that is more realistic. You need to know anatomy, biology. You need to know geometry to create illusion of 3 dimensions of perspective. Okay, so this is something that if you want to have these kind of depiction, you must be excellent, okay, with many other sciences. And this was something Greek that you need to study. Okay, humanism as a way of thinking was just applying these principles of individualism, um, uh, one life in your lifetime, that you can improve, make progress, achieve progress, and use it for the improving your environment. Okay, that all leads to nature, understanding nature, sciences, studying scholarship, but also to individualism and secularism, materialism on some way. Of course, doesn't mean that those people were not religious, they were not believers. They were, most of them, but you can change it. You don't have to listen to the church all the time. So when we have this shift from medieval to Renaissance art, I explain some basic principles that you have in here. Just like we are not going to deal with Baroque, so just read art and culture books and you shall analyze it. Okay, this is a beautiful example because only this small part of the painting, The Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci, are people and Jesus, but the other, if you cover, try to lay your hand, like cover one half of the picture, and you see beautiful geometrical depiction of some room. Okay, exact. There had never been such thing. Okay, metaphor of Aristotle and Plato, besieged by, surrounded by many other philosophers of ancient Greek and Rome. And yeah, I added some of interesting guys from Ptolemy, Euclid, Zoroaster, Plotinus, Diogenes, my favorite, Anaxagoras, Pythagoras, Socrates in here. So this is really interesting stuff. Okay, but as there are some more pictures, we're not going to deal with this. Michelangelo Buonarroti, Sistine Chapel, Albrecht Dürer, Raphael Santi, Albrecht Dürer again, Byzantine or maybe Kievan Russian icon of Madonna versus Madonna by Leonardo da Vinci, so you can see the difference again. Okay, restoration by students from some university. Okay, some attempts with linear perspective, but also mythology, a Greek Roman mythology as symbol of revival of those ideas. Naked woman, 100 years ago, these guys would be burned at stake, just like Albrecht Dürer would have been burned at stake also at that time. So that was completely brand new thing, that he's almost like Jesus Christ. And this is the thing, to understand proportional to humanistic subject or matter, to understand, you need to look for golden cut, golden ratio, mathematical perspective, but also natural origins, natural ideal that is even in autopsy. This, how else can you find it? And Vitruvian man, that is in the background of this presentation, is the study of the man, proportion, mathematics, and so on. Okay, concerning Renaissance, I'm not sure if I like a lot of things. Okay, there were not so many sites of religious, of ecclesiastical character, just like Santa Maria del Fiore in Florence, but mostly of burgher houses, city halls, but also fortifications. So this was something different. Okay, the Sistine Chapel, there had never been so important. Okay, so another comparison, of course, David as the symbol of Renaissance. And within the legacy, we have this printing press, movable type, Gutenberg Bible. Millions of copies of books are moving, and now this it helps with learning and introducing national languages instead of Latin, for example. Thus, people suddenly could understand the Bible, and which was beginning of Reformation. New knowledge, science, and technology discoveries, inventions initiated the age of discoveries or the age of explorations, but also the authority of the church decreased, and this is important, and provoked also political changes because the church was a garant of the feudal system. Why there are kings and there are houses? Because bishops gave them the crown. You know, the Pope decided that Anjou, Robert of Anjou, should rule in Hungary. There were no elections, you know. So in this way, states started to do some political changes, and either they moved to authoritarian, that was these absolutistic monarchies, for example, or more democratic forms of government, uh, which were these experiments with the republic in England, with constitutional monarchy, with some elective monarchy in the Netherlands, with USA, of course, with a presidential democratic parliamentary system, and later on even republican or imperial system in France, but still respecting individuals' rights with Code Civil of Napoleon Bonaparte. So you see how far it goes. Even Napoleon Bonaparte was copying uh, Guy Julius Caesar career and Roman Justinian's law. Americans, they copied constitutions of Athens, democracy, division of power, just like in Rome, and in their classicism, that was just copy of Renaissance. That was actually neo-Renaissance architecture. They were using, both of the countries were using fasces, a symbol of republic. Okay, in England they were for inspiration to Rome with the Habeas Corpus Act and with the Bill of Rights. So that's why it's important, because it's kind of a bridge, you know, transition of the centuries when things are being changed. So they also changed their governments. Okay. What else? Okay, this is what I added in here. So antique and Renaissance art, because you're also artistic souls in among us. So influenced Baroque with some features of Baroque, Classicism, what we call Empire style, Empire u nás, tady som pre nábytok, Biedermeier, what I mean, sorry, and historic styles like Neoclassicism or Neo-Renaissance in here. Modern style arts in fine arts, architecture, sculptures of the 19th century. Okay, this is what I also added, and it's important. Humanistic philosophy influenced scientific revolution in the Baroque period. This is something that you may have analyzed with Mr. Wood in literature, and the result was Daniel Defoe or Jonathan Swift, Gulliver's Travels, Robinson Crusoe. That one man can go, travel, clash with nature and with circumstances, but generally, thanks to his common sense, he can actually overcome the obstacles and he can find back home, like great travel like Marco Polo. Uh, of course, Jordan Brown, Galileo Galilei, Newton were actually, these guys were not from the Renaissance period, but already from Baroque period. But that was kind of a result of this evolution with all the discoveries in astronomy and physics and mathematics and so on. Enlightenment and late Baroque and Classicistic period, definitely that was kind of like a new Renaissance. Age of Reasons, this is how they call it in England and in USA, with John Locke, with Benjamin Franklin, with Thomas Paine, and from this, their ideas, even encyclopedists, we were like Denis Diderot, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Voltaire, you know, so we have whole Enlightenment, that is humanism, but applied in the sciences with scientific research. At this moment, I believe that Natalka Jarka didn't stress it in her project work, but in your essays, even use this point from hypothesis to synthesis, and all the circle using listing, using excerption, using analysis, experiment, again analysis, deduction, and so on. Finally, generalization, and in the end, that would be synthesis. So this is actually something we call science, scientific process, and thus philosophy and scholarship are completely changing and bringing industrial revolution with with steam engines, with railways and locomotives, with hot air balloons and airships and airplanes in the end, and electricity, and finally we have communicative era, with IT stuff, with computers and so on. This would not be possible without Renaissance and humanism, and of course coming back to ancient Greeks. So historically, it affected creation of constitutional monarchies, then enlightened absolutism, but with judicial equality. In France, it was not so bad, but later in Maria Theresa and Joseph II, they issued so many laws good for common people that we celebrate her today, after centuries. Um for example, Friedrich the Wise, the King of Prussia, modern Germany started with people who suddenly had right to go to elections and vote for the members of Prussian parliament, despite it was monarchy. So this is how even modern republican governments with elected parliaments and presidential system appeared. So we have the restoration and even evolution of democracy as a system. Another step, another age of the girl that is not baby anymore. It's like grown up girl. Okay, with famous characters in here, you need to know them. Okay, I have to add some more pictures of Hieronymus Bosch because it's so crazy, so interesting. That's cool. Okay, I added some videos. Don't worry, you're not going to watch them. Okay, so I added this presentation. Let's check out the time. Half an hour. Perfect, guys. So I have to write down also the topics for your seminar so we can analyze it. And yeah, Age of Discovery. So I think that we can move to this last part for today, definitely. You also know the notes, but this year I tried to change this word notes into presentations, so this may be interesting and new for you. I wouldn't say notes, but especially more pictures in here. So Age of Discoveries or Age of Explorations. That's a beautiful presentation, I believe. I had to add much information, and some pictures from this book of Nicholas Harden, a German book from 1970s or 80s that was really popular in the late 80s and early 90s in Czechoslovakia. And for many of us, it was really like cult book. Okay, iconic book. Okay, so these parts are about exploration of new lands and expansion of European countries all the world. Uh, this is the thing that since the 15th century, European explorers sailed to previously unknown land, but there had been many early seafarers discoverers that were either forgotten or maybe didn't have this long-term surviving historical impact. And that were like Phoenicians, for example, that sailed even to Atlantic. There were rumors that there was a Phoenician stela, which is like a stone plate, a monument or tomb. No, that doesn't have to be tomb, just a plate with some inscriptions found on the beach in Brazil, but it was lost, so we have no evidence. So it's only like a theory for this, and no evidence. Greeks, they were great sailors, navigators, sailing also the Canaries and so on. Romans, they were really cool businessmen, tradesmen, and they sailed even to India, common thing, using these Arabic trade routes and even to China. And from as far as I noticed, the Chinese realized European civilization only once in their like old history, and it was in times of Roman Empire. That at the time Europeans had some value for the Chinese, that they noticed them. Otherwise, they didn't. Like, they knew that there are some white people there, but it was like they were barbarians for them. Okay, this is Phoenician ship and this is Greek ship. You avoided not only Maturita final oral exams, but even tests, and this could have been some of the pictures or maps that what is there in the picture, and probably you'll need them all. Arabs underestimated history of this nation, of this culture, was extremely important for Age of Explorations. This is map from the periods of maybe Arabic, maybe Umayyad or Abbasid Caliphate, depicting major trade routes of Arabs to Byzantium, to Egypt, to Africa. But as you can see, Arabia, they had like literally short way to India. And after the conquest of Middle East, they had excellent access to them, And not only in the northern territories, the Silk Road going to Beijing and Shenzhou, but even the sea routes to Indian Ocean. And this is how actually Islam got to Indonesia, that the biggest Muslim country in the world today is Indonesia, and then Bangladesh. And it was done through the Arabic missionaries, Islamic missionaries in like 14th and 15th century. So this is interesting that this Eurocentristic point of view is a real different from reality and what we had. So they are going to restore many things. And when Portuguese sailed to India, Arabs were scared that they would actually shatter the dominance of the trade between Asia, India, China, and Europe. So they started to fight, and Portuguese had to carry cannons to fight not only local Indian Rajas, but especially Arabs who were afraid that Portuguese would be conquerors for the slave, ivory, and gold trade, which they happened. Okay, Vikings. Of course, you know this story, so I'm not going to repeat it. So let's move on from there. Forgotten discoveries of Northern Atlantic because due to global changes, climate changes, in this beginning of early modern era that we call a little ice age, caused that not only they were killed out in America, but especially they had to banish they had to abandon settlements in Greenland and mostly even in Iceland for some period from like maybe 300,000 population. There were about like 10,000 Icelandics living, and most of them were hiding in Norway. So most of these Icelandic people today are actually resettlers from Norway. Okay. The other great seafarers were crusaders, and they were being transported on the ships from Venice and from Genoa. So these Italian guys were important. One interesting thing was that there were some papal emissaries traveling to Mongolian Khanates and together with merchants. And after the conquest of Asia by Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan, especially Italians didn't have any problems because they didn't met with them. And these stories of Marco Polo are really interesting thing that how this Pax Romana, the idol of huge empire that destroys other cultures and so on, but create like supranational empire with very strict government and thus with law and justice, of course, for those. And just like papal emissaries in Marco Polo and his uncles, they had protection from the Mongolian Khan, and they was actually safe for them to travel across Silk Road without any problems, and which was not possible with the Ottoman Empire on rise, with Russian Empire being created, and so on. So they had to find such a new way to Asia around Africa. Another navigators in Northern Europe were these Hanseatic towns, or the League of Hansa, or Hanseatic League, which I call like small medieval naval European Union because they just share common market. They didn't have to pay tolls, which means there are no borders, no limits for the free flow of trades, products, people, and ideas. This is actually European Union today. Okay, Marco Polo's travels and his book The Million, but another forgotten thing is that Chinese also organized some explorations for which they didn't this is actually Spanish ship Caravela called Santa Maria, which was the flagship of the fleet of three ships of Christopher Columbus, compared to one of 7 or 8 huge trade ships of 200 ships, big fleet of Chinese Ming dynasty of Admiral Shen He, who between like at the end of 14th and beginning of 15th century sailed in order to search for new markets to trade and new ideas. And they sailed down to Southeast Asia, of course, and to India, and as you can see, even to Persia and to Arabic Caliphate at that time, which was slowly becoming Ottoman Empire. Many this is my favorite hypothesis. If you remember this 1433, the Shanghai naval expedition, and like 10 or 20 years later, Johann Gutenberg, constructed his movable print. That that was actually had been actually Chinese invention. Okay, I like this using past perfect tense in history because it's perfect. Okay, but we need two countries to enlist to come to the scene: Spain and Portugal, who sailed to the Atlantic Ocean. So this is history of Iberian Peninsula with very interesting ethno-linguistic history, from Basques as the oldest nation in Europe, with Celts called Iberians, Lusitans, with wars and conquests of Hispania by Romans and parts of Hispania, and even arrival of Visigoths, of Vandals, but all of these nations were Romanized, so Romans were dominant. Since 8th century, now they were occupied by Moors, who held these Muslims in Caliphate of Cordoba and Toledo. Were being called, but still they kept like highly developed scholarship with geography, astronomy, and this was also another basement for them, for Spain and Portugal, to be here. What else? They also translated Greek and texts from this geography, astronomy to kind of motivation. And this is GIF picture showing, and let's start from the beginning, of the year 1000, Arabic lands and small Christian kingdoms in the north. These are actual languages. How they're being spread during Reconquista means reconquest, reconquering of Iberian Peninsula from the hands of Mars by 1492. And as you see that Castilian language as a basement for Spanish language became dominant together with Portuguese or Galician, but Catalan still by like 2000, year 2000, or Basque still surviving, you see. Okay, so let's move on. So these kingdoms are Aragon, Navarra, Castile, Leon, Portugal, which I forgot. Probably I mentioned all of them. So Reconquista, reconquering, and they did it. Finally, two main kingdoms remain: Aragon of Ferdinand of Aragon and Castile of Isabella of Castile. Kingdom of Portugal independent at the time, and Kingdom of Granada, which was Emirate of Granada, last 10 of Mars. When Ferdinand of Aragon asked Isabella to marry him, she said, "Okay, but you have to fulfill one thing for me and to conquer the last 10, because then we can like cleanse all the peninsula from the hands of Muslims." And he did it, and there was great wedding. This is a scene where the Emir of Granada is handing over the keys from the gates of Granada to Ferdinand and Isabella as new kingdoms of Spain. Even Portugal later was joined this kingdom in personal union during Philip II. Still, we need a lot of purposes and reasons of discoveries in the 15th century. So, this spirit of Renaissance, where the idea of the Earth as a globe was in here. For that reason, technology is cartography. If I show you again Muslim culture, so astrolabe, sextant were actually inventions of Arabs. Maps, Ptolemy map was like commonly used, and was commonly used by Arabs centuries before Christopher Columbus. So this is interesting. Latin sails are nothing more than Arabic sails that Arabic fishermen had been using in the Persian Gulf, in Indian Ocean, in Arabic Sea, Red Sea, and so on. So you see that there was interesting inspiration in various cultures. Okay, pictures of sextant, compass, astrolabe, and spices, because it was one of the main ingredients that Europeans want to have. Of course, how to get it is that you need to have better weapons, and thanks to Ottomans and introduction of firearms in late medieval ages, they started production and scientific revolution, because this important thing that you can use against locals. Of course, not only spices, but in silk and porcelain from China, ivory, slaves from Africa, and gold from everywhere, and diamonds from everywhere. Search for wealth, but even attempt to seize honor and glory. This is important thing not to be forgotten. Of course, Ottoman occupation of these lands, because now this time Ottomans, just like, unlike Arabs, they interrupted this trade with setting very high toll upon these spices and silk and porcelain from Asia. So for them it was just not efficient. It cost like tremendous. It cost a fortune to buy it. Of course, Christian faith was always mentioned as the first thing. So for many historians, it is one of the main motivations, but it's not true. It was, I actually, that's my opinion, but I think that for them it was the least, but very important part. So you cannot go outside. Like for the Portuguese, they gave you the ship, but you need to have a business plan and plan for mission, for Christianizing mission. Then the church approved it, and you had the right to go there. Even king was willing to give you money for that. So that was a bit different. And rise of the power of Portugal and Spain, because these guys, when you look in the map, are in perfect position for discoveries. Who should do that? Sweden, Norway, Hungary? Okay, so logically, these countries in the West Europe and the Atlantic Ocean would be the ones. Before I move on to Portuguese, I check the time. Okay, so 15 minutes. Let's pass it by. At the beginning, this king was in here. Actually, at the beginning, it was Prince. You'll see one map when Henry the Navigator, King of Portugal, still as a Prince of Portugal, who at the end of Reconquista, when Portuguese had nothing to do, so they missed experience from crusades and these heroic stories. So they were begging their father, Joao the First, like, please let us go for some expedition or something. And the only enemy was over the sea, and that was Ceuta, which is in Algeria or Morocco. Now I'm not sure. And they actually built some ships, tried out this caravelas, Portuguese cross in here, and they actually crossed the sea, attacked the town, which was not like defended very well. They didn't expect attack from anybody, and it was full of slaves and ivory. So the loot was excellent. Since that time, even when he became the king, he couldn't sail open seas. So he established school of navigation that provided navigators, experienced sailors, and he himself initiated campaigns to Africa. But every expedition who came back from with loot, they had to bring new maps, new coastal drawings, for example, and new discoveries. And in this way, Portuguese were slowly conquering one by land by another. Hungary was much richer, much had much more power and possibilities than Portugal. So for them, they couldn't afford to do this. So this is also important when Spain did it. So when you look at this map, you'll see that from Ceuta 1415, this is time when Henry the Navigator, as a prince, was attacking this town. But gradually, as you see, Madeira 1419, Canary Islands 1336, even before, Cape Bojador, there's 1434, Cape Conchanuar, which is 1416, Rio de Oro, 1435, 1448, 55. As you see, gradually they're going down. 1460, 70s, 80s, Benin, Bioko, Sao Tome and Principe, is even Portuguese-speaking island today. 1470s, gradually sailing down to the south. Every time coming back home. And if there was some unrealistic proposal for this expedition, for this campaign, so they just didn't allow it. They didn't go there. So this is interesting. As you see, in 1488 they would go to the South Africa, and even took them another many years to sail to India, which would happen actually uh, after discovery of America. After the Treaty of Tordesillas, also with settling in Brazil, and finally managing these Indonesia islands of spices, that was the most interesting part for them. Easy to get because in China, in India, these empires were pretty strong enough and could defend against some colonization and so on. Okay, Bartolomeu Diaz was the one who sailed down to, how do you call it, Storm Cape, čiže Burkový mys, but the King Joao the second, who was the next great navigators king, počkajte, musím prerušiť nahrávanie, decka, lebo Sandra je hladná. Dobre, prepáčte za vyrušenie, Sandra dostala nájsť, takže ešte 12 minút vám skúsim prebehnúť teda, čo nám tu zostáva. Okay, so Bartolomeu Diaz was the first one who sailed, but Joao II, King of Portugal, gave it a brand new name that was Cape of Good Hope, because thanks to winds and sea streams, they were pretty sure that they discovered a big, huge ocean. So they supposed that it would be the big ocean leading to India. So that was hope of getting there. So that's why the Cape of Good Hope. His voyage and his ship in a museum. Okay, still later on, there were suddenly many navigators proposing various scenarios and routes for voyages, and this school of navigation and King Joao had also council established by his father Henry the Navigator, who were approving these projects. They were navigators, veterans of navigators, they were geographers, but even like bishops, and all of them had to accept it. And sometimes it was not realistic because, for example, Columbus didn't know mathematics and they knew that Earth is much bigger than Columbus expected. For Magellan, it was realistic, but not in their finances, the economical possibilities of the Kingdom of Portugal. So, as you see, Columbus, Magellan, two most famous navigators, were refused by Portuguese. Okay, Columbus wrote, that he supposed that the globe is much smaller because refused by King of Portugal. He was supported by new Spanish Queen Isabella of Castile, and his voyages got to Caribbean, what in English is called West Indies, because even he called it India, West India. But he also discovered the coast of Venezuela and Costa Rica. But until his death, he didn't believe that he discovered new continents. So 12 October 1492 is rediscovery of America. So Columbus Day, but you see, for many Native Americans, it is a bad day, not nothing to be celebrated because many other things came in here. Okay, we'll mention it. Okay, Spain, you cannot see the mouse in here. Spain got to Kitai before us. Kitai is China. So I made this, like, I believe, funny pictures. Okay, let's ask the Pope to arrange some agreement. This is Cristiano Ronaldo, Portuguese footballer. Messi is, though Argentinian, but Spanish speaker. So for me, it was nice comparison. For the Treaty of Tordesillas, where suddenly Portugal was very angry because for like 50, 60 years of voyages, they almost managed to get to India, and suddenly Spaniards go there. What if? So they asked the Pope that we had been there before, and Spain, but we had this. And the Pope actually decided very clever way that he said the world is big enough, so let's divide it in meridian, 38 meridian, west to Spain, east to Portugal. And in this way, since now, every Portuguese ship sailing around Africa sailed to this meridian and sailing along it if they would discover some lands, and they did, and it was this tip Cape of Brazil, and this is how Portugal came to be. Okay, they got to India in 1492 with Vasco da Gama and established here trade posts because India was not very interested. They asked Portuguese, "What do you have to trade?" And Portuguese, "We got like caoutchouc, rubber." We have two, and that's all. So that was they came like poor merchants. So they allowed them. You can build some like trade posts here in Calcutta and Goa, but later on, Portuguese and especially Dutch, and then British and French armies were much stronger, and they managed to conquer India. Florentine navigator Amerigo Vespucci suggested that new continent America is in here because his crew climbed the mountains of Costa Rica and Panama, and they saw ocean from the other side, so they suggested it's like there is a huge ocean over there. Waldseemüller map is one of the first using this name Amerigo Vespucci. That why Columbus when Columbus refused it. So these German Nuremberg, from Nuremberg cartographies, they made these huge maps and globes, start to use this word, and this is how this new continent was given name. Sorry, I had to scratch my eye while this huge map from Wikipedia is being downloaded. Obviously my signal is not so fast. I'm sorry. I believe you don't mind it very much, and you can actually, of course, roll it. So I will close it. Sorry for that, but we are running out of time. Okay, Pedro Alvarez Cabral was the one who discovered Brazil, and since now they started to expand, and because Spaniards were not interested in this rainforest of Brazil, so they crossed the meridian of Treaty of Tordesillas, and surprisingly later, suddenly Spaniards realized that Portuguese had like the biggest country in Latin America and South America. Actually, also north of Brazil, not west of Brazil, there were three small Guyanas colonies that were given to France, Britain, and Netherlands. This Dutch Guyana is called Suriname today, British Guyana is still part of their Commonwealth, and French Guiana is part of the territories of the French Republic, and it's also on euro coins, and they got these rockets heading to Spain in here. Okay, Magellan Expedition. I'm not going to tell you anything about it because I would have been speaking for 1 hour. If possible, guys, check out the maps, of course, and read the book that I really enjoy. It's Stefan Zweig, Austrian famous novelist, and you can easily find his Conqueror of the Seas book that is in PDF form. And it's actually about a captain boat diary, shipboat captain diary of Ferdinand Magellan and Juan Elcano, who was the one leading, commanding their ships, and one ship, Victoria, until the end when Magellan, Ferdinand Magalhães, was killed in the Philippines on the halfway midway. There are also many videos, so this is one of these that I really like. So only 8 minutes, so you can watch it and
Simple
prepare.
History,
Okay.
Epic History TV,
Simple
collaboration.
history, epic history, you can find it. So Ferdinand
In
Magellan,
the
if you
late
put it,
1400s.
you'll find it over the YouTube. Okay, guys. So these are two things that I strongly recommend you. Okay, I need to check out the time again. 5 minutes. I only go through the slides because we don't have more time for this, and I'm having lesson with you because still I have Wednesday. Okay, so let's move on. These parts about the conquest of pre-Columbian America, as we call them. There are many tribes, many ethnic groups, nationalities, not nationalities, but tribes, but there were also some like more or less highly developed cultures that were actually on decline. With those Aztec, Mayans had been already gone, and Incas in here. Both of them were conquered in very specific way due to Mexican Aztec Empire. They believed that arriving Europeans with were actually gods. The god coming back from exile after ultimate creation of the world battle clash, a duel between two main gods, and you'll see Tenochtitlan Venice of
Lahodné,
Mesoamerica.
bebe dobré ráno sú z 5 celozrnných
Why
cereálí
there
ako
is
ovoz, pšenica a jačmeň. Vychutnajte si ich.
I'm really surprised that I have a commercial in here because I should not have commercial in here. Invicta, okay, this is something that probably Daniel knows.
After having covered the rise of the Aztec Empire, it's time we take a closer
Okay, but there are
specifics.
actually more pictures
To
about
put
how
things simply,
Tenochtitlan
the city was located on an island
look like. Okay, so very quickly, they were welcomed as gods, despite some other surrounding tribes and Indian, like Native American nations, knew that they are not gods. They were not gods, so they entered the house, entered their capital city, and what they did was that they uh, tried to force Montezuma, the king of Aztecs, to accept Christianity and be subject of the queen and king of Spain, which he refused. And he was killed, and the Spaniards barely saved their lives when they fought from the city, besieged city of Tenochtitlan. And they came back the next year also with reinforcements, and all allied Indians who were enemies of Aztecs and conquered and destroyed Tenochtitlan. And Mexico, as Mexico City, Ciudad del Mexico, is in here. Another history crunch. This is a really cool one. The conquest of Aztecs. The conquest of Incas Empire was similar, but in the way that Incas knew that they were not like gods, but they couldn't imagine they could be stronger than them. They underestimated the power of Spaniards with their technologies, or even dogs and horses. That was surprising. So Atahualpa was captured by Spaniards, and in the battles they had, so they suffered like terrible defeat, especially from Mexico, from Peru. Today, these two countries have high production of gold and silver than Australia, South Africa, or Slovakia in terms of Habsburg monarchy. So also this gold and silver was kind of El Dorado for them. The other things are about facts from golden paradox, economical crisis in Europe, about slavery, beginnings of slavery. So just read it. About extinction actually of indigenous cultures, because especially of diseases, And those who survived in Brazil, Bolivia, Colombia, Mexico, only small parts of them. Still, if somebody said that there is no multicultural society, there is in Latin America. When you have these Creoles, indigenous people, African slaves, Hispanic colonies mixing together, countries like Colombia, Brazil have really mixed racial ethnicity. Okay, some pictures in here with slave trade and so one with so-called Columbian triangle or triangle exchange or Columbian exchange, also helping with exploration of England, France, and Netherlands, which gives you another voyages from England. That was John Cabot, Francis Drake, Walter Raleigh, James Cook, and so on. For France, Samuel de Champlain, Jacques de Cartier, Jean Nicolet, for example, and many others crossing the Huron Lake. They're really interesting. The Dutch, excellent Dutch, Abel Tasman, for example, and many others with discoveries. Actually, they challenged these Portuguese and claimed their territories and managed to settle there down. But even Russians with Willem Barents and Vitus Bering, Dutch and Danish navigators sailing for them, even expanding not only in Siberia but in Alaska. That's why they sold it in 19th century later. Results in here with great discoveries, knowledge, development of all the things, new crops, price revolution, and colonial empires of Spain, Portugal, France that ruled there by the 20th century, guys. Videos, thanks for attention. So I believe that's all because in a minute I got a lesson and it's like on seconds. That's all from me. Have a nice weekend, guys. Stay negative in test and positive in mind, and count your mark for final mark from history. Bye bye.